The envelope fell from the bag as if pushed by something invisible. No one touched it. No one saw it. But when Martha bent down to pick it up, time seemed to stop. It was an old piece of paper, carefully folded, with a name written by hand she hadn't seen in more than 2 decades. Her mother's name, and a phrase below it, written in handwriting she thought she had long forgotten. Read this when your world falls apart. The waiting room was crowded, but around Martha there was a silence that seemed to scream. The hospital's cold lights hit her wrinkled face. Her purse trembled in her lap, as if it, too, knew what was about to happen. On the other side of the wall, her granddaughter was being taken into surgery that, according to doctors, had no guaranteed return. And in that moment of deep pain, God answered, but the answer didn't come through a vision, or a voice, or a prophecy. It came as a forgotten note, a letter from the past, a hidden psalm. And what happened next, no one could ever explain. Have you ever lived through a moment when everything seemed lost? Have you ever prayed, not knowing if someone was really listening? Do you still believe that God speaks even through the crease of an old handbag? Then stay with me until the end of this story, because the psalm Martha found didn't just change the outcome of the surgery. It changed everything she believed about faith, about loss, and about promises. If this opening touched your heart, write the name of someone you love in the comments. Maybe they're in the hospital. Maybe they need healing or a message from heaven. This chain of faith begins with you, and it might be the start of a miracle. She didn't want to be there. Martha Reynolds wasn't the kind of woman who begged, but for 3 weeks now, her voice had echoed through hospital hallways like someone pleading for a miracle. White coats no longer intimidated her, nor did the tired eyes of doctors, nor the numbers on test results. The only number that mattered now was April 27th, the date of Emily's surgery, her 9-year-old granddaughter. Her reason to keep going: she had lost her son in a car accident, her daughter-in-law during childbirth, and Emily was all that remained of a promise she felt God had forgotten. The girl's heart didn't beat like other children's. The condition was rare, the surgery invasive, and hope scarce. That morning, Martha woke before the sun. She brewed coffee like she always did. If she couldn't drink it, she grabbed the old leather handbag that once belonged to her mother. Not out of superstition, but because Emily always said, that purse smells like grandma's hugs. Maybe it was just the scent of old faith one Martha had long stopped pretending to believe in. The hospital in Austin felt colder that day. The pediatric wing was quiet. There was something in the air she couldn't name, a mix of waiting, fear, and goodbye. Emily was too calm, and that hurt. "It's okay, Grandma," she said. "God already talked to me last night." Martha smiled but said nothing. She wasn't sure anymore whether those words came from her granddaughter's faith or just exhaustion. God already talked to me last night. That phrase echoed in her mind, because Martha hadn't heard a thing, hadn't felt a thing, hadn't dreamed a thing. She had felt distant from anything divine ever since she buried her son. Faith had become a framed picture on a wall, pretty, but useless. She still prayed, but always afraid no one was listening. When she said goodbye to Emily at the surgery room door, something made her clutch the handbag tighter against her chest. She sat on a bench in the reception area and froze. Minutes later, she reached into the side zipper of the bag, something she never used, never opened, but something nudged her. Something said, "Look here," and then the paper fell out. At first, she thought it was an old brochure, maybe a candy wrapper, but no, it was folded 3 times, and had the name Helen written by hand, her mother's name, in handwriting she would recognize even with her eyes closed. Her hands began to tremble. She slowly unfolded it, and there it was, a verse, a phrase, and something that felt like more than coincidence. "Read this when your world falls apart." That was the line on top, and below it, just 2 words, hidden psalm. She tried to remember. Her mother had been devout, always writing down psalms, promises, prayers, taping them to the fridge, the Bible, the bathroom mirror, but this one she had never seen. Martha leaned her back against the wall and closed her eyes. How had that piece of paper ended up there? Why today? And why was it that she only saw it now? As she struggled to breathe, a doctor walked by and said, "Surgery has started. It'll take a few hours." She nodded in silence, unable to speak. She looked back at the note. Still, she didn't have the courage to open it completely. It was folded in a way that felt like it was hiding something more, but she would wait, because she felt It wasn't the right time yet. Something inside her whispered, "Not yet." Beside her, a nurse pushed a gurney down the hallway. On the TV, a soft instrumental commercial played, but Martha heard nothing. That paper seemed to hum in her hands. She knew, deep down, she knew. This wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a key, a password, a memory, or maybe a warning. But what was inside it? And why now, so many years after her mother's death, would she find something that seemed placed there for this exact moment? And that's how it started, with a bag, a note, and a surgery scheduled for 10:07 a.m. But what that handwriting was hiding wasn't just a prayer. She kept the note closed for over an hour, not out of neglect, not out of fear, but because she sensed something sacred inside, something that couldn't be opened in the middle of a hallway filled with hurried footsteps and medical alerts. The paper felt like it had a soul, like it was breathing, and each fold held a memory not yet ready to reveal itself, until a voice called her name, Mrs. Reynolds. She looked up. It was the same nurse from before. Young, dark-haired, kind eyes. "Are you all right?" the nurse asked, noticing the paper clutched in Martha's hand. I think I found something." The nurse leaned in gently. "If it's an answer, receive it. Sometimes God answers in ways we're not expecting." That sentence touched something deep, as if spoken to confirm what Martha already sensed. She gave a faint, grateful smile, and when the nurse walked away as if making space for something sacred to happen, Martha Finale unfolded the paper. It was an old notebook page, thick, yellowed paper, 3 vertical folds, 1 horizontal. At the top, written in graceful handwriting, "Hidden Psalm for the Time of Invisible Rescue." Tears welled up in her eyes. That handwriting, the way the letters were drawn, not just written. It was the same script from the letters her mother used to send when she was away at college, the same as the notes she used to find in her lunchbox as a little girl. But there was one problem. Her mother had passed away 22 years ago, and that bag, she hadn't used it in at least 10. Her heart began to race. How did this end up here now? She tried to come up with logical explanations. Maybe the paper had been in the bag all along and she'd never noticed. Maybe it had been accidentally left there. But none of it made sense. That bag had been cleaned, moved, even donated and returned more than once. She had lent it to her daughter years ago when Emily was still a baby. Later, she stored it in the back of the closet, wrapped in plastic. She had never opened that side zipper. It was as if the note had been placed there recently, but by whom? The handwriting was unmistakable, and then the memory came. A moment she had buried long ago. It was 2001. Martha was 45. Her mother, Helen, was battling advanced stage cancer. She spent her days between rounds of radiation and quiet prayers in the backyard garden. Even while weak, she kept writing verses on colorful scraps of paper and hiding them around the house. She called them seeds. She said that when the right time came, God would make them grow. "One day, when you need it most, you'll find one of these seeds, and you'll know I never stopped praying for you." Back then, Martha didn't give it much weight. She was grieving. Her husband had died in a car crash just months earlier. Her faith was in ruins. She yelled at God, cried alone, and avoided opening any drawer that reminded her of her mother, especially the bag. Now, in that hospital, with her granddaughter in surgery and her faith hanging between fear and a miracle, her mother's prophecy seemed to be blooming at last. That page was one of the seeds. In the bottom corner of the note, there was a scribbled message she'd never seen before, written in lighter ink, almost as if hurriedly jotted down. "For when your eyes are too tired and your soul doesn't know where to seek help." It was a living message, as if written just yesterday. As if her mother knew exactly what would happen 22 years later. As if God had allowed that paper to travel through time, tucked inside worn leather, to appear at the precise moment when Martha was about to lose what she loved most. She gently folded the paper again, like cradling a sacred relic. She looked up. "Mum, you knew, didn't you?" A woman sitting nearby, holding a baby, noticed Martha's emotional expression. "Would you like a glass of water, ma'am?" "No, dear, thank you. Everything's going to be okay. I'm praying for my sister. She's in the room next door." The two women exchanged a glance. Nothing else needed to be said. In that hallway, where the air smelled of antiseptic and hope, everyone was praying for someone. Martha leaned her head against the wall, clutching the note to her chest. For a moment, She remembered an old dream, a dream where she walked down a dark road and someone had left small candles lit along the ground. She never saw who it was, but she followed the light. Now, it all made sense. Every hidden note, every forgotten verse, every one of her mother's prayers, and every silence from God, everything pointed to that day. Everything started to make sense, but the full content of the psalm still wasn't visible. It was written on the back of the note, folded like a secret, and in that moment, Martha realized the message hadn't fully been revealed. The back of the note had been sealed with old adhesive tape, as if Helen herself had wanted her daughter to read it only at the right time. She couldn't explain it, but something inside her whispered, "Don't open it yet." The right moment would come, and the psalm, when read, would have the power to change everything. The doctor's voice echoed through the hallway, like a veiled sentence. "We're entering the most delicate phase now. It's in God's hands." Martha didn't reply. She simply bowed her head in respect, but inside, her soul trembled. She was gripping the bag so tightly that her fingernails left marks on the worn leather. The note was still folded, tucked in the side pocket, the old tape still intact, as if it somehow knew that this line could only be crossed at the exact moment. The clock read 10:43 a.m. Emily had been in surgery for over 30 minutes, and up to that point, everything was progressing as expected. But what no one knew was that, at that exact moment, something silent was about to happen. Something no machine could record. Something that would come from a place no eyes could see. Martha closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and for the first time in years, whispered a real prayer. No form, no script, just one raw plea. "Lord, if you're still there, then speak to me now." She slowly opened her bag, took out the note as if holding a love letter, a memory from someone who had left, but never really left. She unfolded it gently. The adhesive tape crackled old and brittle as if resisting one last time, and finally, the back revealed the hidden words. It wasn't a typical psalm. It was a psalm marked by time. The words were slightly faded, but still readable. She began to read, not with her lips, but with her heart. At that very moment, a metallic noise echoed from the direction of the ICU. A long beep. The nurse rushing by stopped. The doctor ran in. Someone shouted for backup, and everything inside Martha froze. She stood up, the note still in her hand. She didn't understand what was happening, but the synchronicity was chilling. She began reading the psalm aloud, word by word, verse by verse, unaware that, on the other side of the wall, Emily's heart had suddenly slowed. Inside the OR, the medical team exchanged nervous glances. "It's like the system just froze," said one of the anesthesiologists. "Reboot," the surgeon shouted, "Pressure's dropping." Meanwhile, in the waiting room, Martha continued, "The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade at your right hand." A passing nurse stopped. She heard Martha's trembling voice, soft but steady. She didn't know why, but she stood still, as if those words carried weight, as if something invisible was being broken. In the operating room, Emily's pulse flickered. The monitor blinked. The ventilator vibrated in an odd rhythm, and then without warning, everything stabilized. The pulse returned. The blood pressure normalized. The monitor emitted that steady, rhythmic beep. The surgical team looked at each other, confused. "What just happened?" asked one of the assistants. "I'm not sure, but it felt like something interrupted the collapse." The lead surgeon exhaled. Whatever it was, it worked. Outside, Martha finished the reading. She folded the paper again, held the bag to her chest, and for the first time since it all began, she cried with relief. The nurse who had paused returned to her side. "Ma'am, were you praying?" "Yes, it was a psalm from my mother. I felt something when I heard your voice, as if something passed through here." "Maybe something did, sweetheart. Can you tell me which psalm it was?" "Not yet, not now, but soon." She smiled through misty eyes. "That psalm still has something left to say." The hallway returned to its usual motion, people walking, phones ringing, hurried footsteps. But Martha remained, silent, still present. On the opposite wall, a painting of a mountain caught her attention. Below the image, a phrase engraved, "Where does my help come from?" She froze. It was the same phrase written at the top of the note. Coincidence? At that point, she no longer believed in coincidence. It felt like everything was being orchestrated by something greater. Every detail, every fold, every moment. Emily was still in surgery, but But Martha knew something had already shifted, something invisible, irreversible, and sacred. Back in her seat, she closed her eyes and whispered, "Mum, thank you for not forgetting." And there, for the first time since she lost her son, she felt she wasn't alone. Not completely, but there was more. Because the psalm still held something, a phrase hidden between the lines, a promise that would only make sense the next day. And it was in that moment that everything began to change. She couldn't remember how many years had passed since she last dreamed of her mother, but that night she dreamed. Helen was in the garden of their old house, watering the flowers with her hands, like she used to when the hose would break. She didn't speak, just smiled, and let the water run through her fingers as if teaching something about time, patience, or faith. Martha watched from a distance but couldn't move closer. It was like she was trapped behind invisible glass. She wanted to shout, cry, run, but all she could do was watch, until Helen lifted her eyes and gently said, "You need to remember what you tried to forget." She woke up with a jolt. The hospital room was darker than usual, quieter than normal. Emily had made it through the surgery with stable signs and was sedated in the ICU. The night felt frozen in time, and Martha, though exhausted, knew that dream wasn't just a dream. You need to remember what you tried to forget. But what then? A long-buried memory surged back with force. The year was 2001. Martha was drowning in grief. She had lost her husband 6 months earlier, a senseless accident with a truck on a rural road. She was a teacher, but never returned to school. She withdrew into silence, pushed everyone away, especially her mother. Helen kept trying to help. She brought meals, flowers, handwritten prayers. One of the last times she visited, she came with that very purse. "Take it, keep it with you. It might not seem important now, but one day it will." Martha rejected it coldly. "Mom, I don't want any of this. Not your bag, not your faith." Helen only smiled with the patience of someone who loves deeply. "That's okay. One day you'll understand." The next day, Helen got sick. She was hospitalized and never came home. Martha remembered it like watching a movie of her own life. The pain, the guilt, the rage at God. She stopped praying, stopped singing, stopped going to church. She built a new version of herself, skeptical, practical, logical, but deep down, the emptiness remained, only quieter. For years, she avoided thinking of her mother during moments of prayer. It was as if invoking Helen would mean confronting everything left unsaid, everything rejected. And now, with Emily hanging between life and death, God seemed to be bringing everything back. "You need to remember what you tried to forget." She opened her phone and browsed an old folder with scanned photos. Among them, one image stood out. Her mother's fridge, covered in colorful papers, with Bible verses, most written in bold letters. But there was one, at the bottom of the door, taped with blue tape, that she'd never noticed before. She zoomed in. There it was. "The Lord is your keeper." The same line she had read in the psalm during the surgery. Same verse, same handwriting, same tone of gentle warning. Her heart began to race, and then she saw a small detail. In the corner of that fridge note, there was a little flower drawn in pen, exactly like the flower drawn on the note she found in the bag. That note wasn't an accident. It was a reminder, a second chance, a voice from heaven saying, "Don't finish the journey without hearing what your mother left behind." That night, Martha knelt on the hospital room floor, alone, without words, just the memory of what she had tried to forget, now pulsing alive in the center of her chest. "God, I don't know how to do this anymore. I don't have the right words, but if this psalm came to me, if it was my mother's hand, or yours, then teach me how to come back." She stayed like that for minutes, maybe hours, until she felt something different. Not a touch, not a voice, but a familiar sensation, the same one she used to feel as a child, hiding in her mother's arms during storms. Peace, peace in the chaos, peace without answers. And it was there she decided. The next day, when Emily woke up, she would tell her everything, every memory, every forgotten prayer, every note, because now she knew her mother's seeds were growing. But there was one more thing, something she hadn't noticed. The note had a final line almost faded. She hadn't seen it before, but looking again, she read, "Whoever plants faith in silence will reap a miracle in surprise." She repeated the phrase in a whisper. It wasn't from any psalm she knew. Maybe it was just something her mother used to say, or maybe it was another revelation. The next morning, Martha woke too, her phone buzzing. It was the medical team. Emily had moved her fingers and whispered a word. "Grandma." Martha rushed to the ICU. Her granddaughter's eyes were still closed, but there was a gentle smile on her face. The doctor, a seasoned man, looked amazed. "There's something different about this girl. The way she's recovering after surgery. It's not normal." Martha held Emily's hand and whispered, "Your angel never left you, my sweet girl." But she didn't yet know that Emily had something to share, something that would change everything again. The ICU hallway was quieter than usual. Even the machines didn't beep as loudly. Even the nurse's footsteps didn't interrupt the stillness. It was as if everything was waiting, as if time itself was breathing slowly, giving space for what was coming. Emily still had her eyes closed, but smiled as if dreaming something beautiful. Her tiny fingers gently squeezed Martha's hand, who sat by her bedside, holding the note as if it were part of her own body. There was no fear left in her eyes, only reverence, a sacred silence. The note was still there. That sidefold she had avoided opening through the entire process. The old adhesive tape, worn thin by time, now looked like a seal. And for the first time, Martha felt that she could, that she should, that this was the moment. She took a deep breath, pulled the paper from her bag with trembling but steady hands, and carefully peeled off what remained of the tape. The fold opened slowly, and there, among the words preserved by time, the inscription appeared, Psalm 121, "For when your eyes are too tired to keep waiting for help." Martha stared at the phrase. A chill ran down her spine. This was the psalm Helen had chosen for the time of invisible rescue. And now, standing beside her granddaughter, she understood. It was meant for this moment. For her, for Emily. She pulled out her phone, searched for Psalm 121, and began to read. "I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from?" The words struck deep, as if each one was a reminder, an echo, a heartbeat of faith rising from the depths. "My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore." When she finished reading, Martha realized she wasn't just reading, she was being read. It felt as if the psalm was reading her story, word by word, as if each line wasn't just sacred text, but a living description of her life, of her mother, of her loss, of her granddaughter. She looked at Emily, still asleep, and right there, on the ICU floor, she knelt and prayed. Not as someone who recites, but as someone who cries out, "Lord, if this psalm came to me, if this promise hasn't expired, then let it be fulfilled now. Let your help come. Let your shadow cover us. Let your hand lift us. In Jesus' name." The tears came like soft rain, but each drop seemed to wash away years of silence, of distance, of doubt. When the prayer ended, she stood up and held Emily's hand. Emily opened her eyes, slowly, with effort, but with a light Martha hadn't seen in a long time. "Grandma, I'm right here. My love, right here." Emily looked around, then locked eyes with her grandmother and said, the man in the white robe. He told me to remind you about the note." Martha's spine stiffened. "What man?" "The one who spoke to me before the surgery. I saw him. He stood next to my bed, and then he came with me. He stayed with me the whole time." "And what did he say?" "That the note was a seed, and that you took really good care of it." The girl's words hit Martha like a hammer breaking ancient stone, exactly as Helen had once said, that the seeds would be found, and they would grow at the right time. Emily slowly closed her eyes again, exhausted, but her smile remained, and her breathing steady. Martha stood up with the note in her hands. She walked back into the hallway, looked at the painting of the mountain once more, and reread the words beneath it. "Where does my help come from?" She already knew the answer. Help had come, not with trumpets, not with visible angels, but with an old note, a hidden memory, a psalm planted in time. And in that moment, Martha understood why the psalm had only appeared now. Because God is never late, He prepares. With one hand pressed over her heart, she prayed once more, "Lord, may this psalm reach whoever is listening to this story right now. May it find someone in a hospital, someone tired, someone desperate, someone waiting for help. Let these words be more than text. Let them be life. If this prayer touched you, write down the name of someone who needs help right now in the comments. It could be your child, your mother, someone you love, or even yourself. Write, "My help comes from the Lord," and share this video with someone who needs to remember where their help comes from. Martha slipped the note into her blouse pocket and returned to the room. But what happened in the hours that followed, no one could have predicted. That afternoon, sunlight streamed through the ICU windows with a golden hue, as if heaven was gently brushing the earth in silence. Martha watched as the beams of light drew shapes on Emily's hospital sheet. Emily slept, her face calm, free of pain. Her tiny chest rose and fell with peaceful rhythm. It was almost unbelievable. The surgery had been a success, but what truly surprised the doctors was the speed of her recovery. "Her vitals are better than we expected," said the surgeon. "It's as if she's been under the care of something that's not in any medical handbook." Martha didn't respond. She simply smiled with her eyes. She knew not everything can be explained, and not everything needs to be. That night, as she settled into the chair beside the hospital bed, Emily moved her lips. At first, they were mumbles. Then came a clear sentence. "Grandma, the man in the white robe. Did he speak to you too?" Martha sat up straight. "What man, sweetheart?" "The one who was with me in there. He held my hand and sang softly. He said you were strong, that you hadn't forgotten the note." Martha's spine went cold. She had never mentioned the note to Emily. She found it just minutes before the surgery. There was no way Emily could. "No, he really said that," she whispered. "Yes," he said. "Tell her I haven't forgotten the promise, and that the psalm was read at the right time." Tears welled up without permission. Martha held her granddaughter's hand and looked up. In that plain white ceiling, she could now see an invisible presence alive, someone who had orchestrated every detail, even when the world seemed out of control. The next day, Emily was speaking more clearly. The nurses smiled as they saw her sitting up, still weak, but alert and sweet as always. The doctor came in and told Martha, "This little girl is a miracle." "I don't say that as a doctor. I say it as a father." Martha nodded. She knew that this hospital held stories no medical file could ever contain. Later that day, while packing the bag to transfer Emily to a new room, something caught her attention. Inside the envelope with the medical records left at reception, there was a yellow post-it note stuck to the back of the surgery report. A simple phrase, "Where does my help come from?" The same line from the note, the same line on the hospital wall, the same from Psalm 121. But there was something even more shocking. The handwriting. Martha recognized it instantly. It was her mother's. Impossible, irrational, but real. She took the post-it and brought it to Emily. "Sweetheart, did someone give this to you?" Emily looked thoughtful, then answered, "No, Grandma, but I think the man in the white robe wrote it. He touched my things before he left. I saw him place a paper there." Martha looked up to the ceiling again. Silence, reverence, gratitude. It felt like heaven had left tiny signatures everywhere, like a child tossing pebbles into a lake and watching the ripples spread. Each paper, each phrase, each of it random. Later, in the new hospital room, Emily asked to sing a song. It was an old hymn that Helen used to sing at church. Martha didn't remember ever teaching it to her granddaughter. Yet there she was, singing whole verses with the sweetness of someone who had lived them in a place adults no longer remember. "Who taught you that song, Emily?" "He did. He sang it while he hugged me." Martha could no longer hold back her tears. The pain she had carried for years seemed to melt away softly, as if time was finally giving back what life had once taken. In the days that followed, Emily's recovery amazed everyone. She walked the hallways with the calm of someone who knew more than she said. The nurses began calling her the little angel with the bright eyes. One of them, named Grace, approached Martha on their last day in the hospital. "You know," Grace said softly, "I've seen many patients walk out of this hospital healed, but with this little girl, something is different. The way she looks at you, the way she speaks, it feels like she knows things we're still about to understand." Martha smiled. Maybe she really did talk to heaven. Grace hesitated, then confessed, "I'm a Christian, always have been. But I'll be honest, my faith had fallen asleep. After seeing this girl, I started praying again, believing again, hoping again." Martha gently held the nurse's hands. "Then this story is already fulfilling its purpose." When they left the hospital, Martha had the old leather purse slung over her shoulder. Inside it, the folded paper no longer sealed, with tape, no longer a mystery, but still pulsing with the same power as before. Before getting into the car, she paused, turned around, looked at the hospital one last time, the walls, the windows, the hallways that had witnessed the invisible hand of help. And in a whisper, she said, "Thank you, Lord. Thank you for not forgetting what my mother planted. Thank you for Emily, for this song, for this hidden message." When they got home, Emily ran to her room and came back holding a colorful envelope. "Grandma, I want to start keeping verses too. I want to plant seeds, just like great-grandma did. Can one?" Martha's lips trembled into a smile. The tears returned to her eyes, but now they flowed with gratitude, not grief. "Yes, my love, of course you can." And in that moment, Martha understood something. What had seemed like the end was just the beginning. Faith was being passed forward, not just as a memory or a tale, but as a legacy, a sacred lineage wrapped in paper, prayer, and quiet miracles. If you've come this far in the story, it's because something in it touched your heart. If so, write in the comments, "The Lord is my keeper," and leave the name of someone you love, someone in need of a miracle, someone waiting for their own sign from heaven. Share this message with someone who needs to remember where their help comes from, because sometimes heaven hides inside an old leather purse, and the miracle is handwritten.